This is going to take a deeper dive in covering what the sculpt tool does and the various brushes and how to reverse a brush. I'm going to use this very simple plane. It's going to be a common scenario. You want to have a moonscape or some Marsscape. How do you create that? Well, sculpting could be a great approach for that. So here I have a regular polygon plane, and in the attribute editor, I have 100 by 100 for the subdivisions of the width and height of the surface. Jumping right to Mesh Tools and opening up the Sculpting tool, clicking this. That way it breaks off. Starting with the Sculpt tool. And there's the brush. If your brush isn't being shown, it might be huge or you're zoomed in too close to see it. The B key, holding down the B key, hold it down and drag left and right is the size of the brush. The M key and dragging up and down will be the magnitude of the brush. If you ever need to set it manually, you could just open up that little properties box and adjust the size of the brush and the strength of the brush there. Let's start with the Sculpt tool. So if the Sculpt tool is selected, well, symmetry's on, luckily, and you can have this wonderful mountain range. I'm going to hit undo. Let's take a look at symmetry under your modeling toolkit, because maybe you don't want everything symmetrical. I do, but maybe you don't, or there's times when you don't. Just turn off symmetry, and when you sculpt, it'll be on one edge. When I release the brush and go back, it's going to go higher and higher. So we could create this valley. However, that's not feeling very moony, Marsy. I know I need to decrease the brush size. Let me make that smaller, and also magnitude. Holding down the M key and dragging down, also less, and just swipe across the surface. This is what I'm thinking about. A little better because this is going to be a large scale surface. And I'll come on back and pick another brush in a second. That's a nice happy crater right there. And that was just drawing a circle, and then you go on the inside and make a sub crater. What if you don't want something to pop up and you want to push it back down? Well, luckily, with all the sculpting tools, if you hold down the control key with the same sculpting tool, it'll do the opposite action. So now it's going to dig into the surface, and that'll allow you to do those wonderful collisions of rocks out on the moon's surface. That's fun. Maybe here's a long one. Holding down, releasing the control key will just return it to its natural pulling up. Let's look at smooth. Under shading, I'm going to go to wireframe on shaded. This way I could see the underlying structure, what's here. Now with the smooth tool selected, if you brush, you can see it's smoothing out, averaging out in between this rough surface and what was created. That's nice. If I continue smoothing though, let's see what happens. Eventually, all of our work is gone. So it's smoothing back out towards the original object. I'm going to pick up the Sculpt tool again, and I'm just going to decrease my brush size and pop up a mountain like this, and use the Smooth tool, just smooth it back down a little bit. Now relax, unlike Smooth, it's not just erasing the object, saying, hey, chill out, relax. So it's migrating the vertices. Relax is moving around the vertices, edges, in case they got all tightened up in one corner due to sculpting operations. It's redistributing them. That's nice. Let's go to grab. Grab is what you think it's going to do. It's going to grab up a chunk. Let me just rotate around. Going to increase my brush size, and grab is lifting up. So it's a lot like the Sculpt tool. Sculpt is building up the surface. Here, if you had a character and you want to yank what exists outward, you want some features of that character, puff out cheeks. That's where the grab comes in. And after you grabbed this surface, maybe you'll jump back to smooth or relax and just push it back a little bit. You don't want to erase everything you did. But as you go along, you'll play with the tool, you'll sculpt, you'll smooth, you'll relax, grab, and you repeat over and over again as you work the model's surface. All right, this is becoming an interesting scene to build a nice lunar base on. Let's go over the pinch tool. And pinch is much like taking two fingers and just pushing it together on that object. See how it's creating this kind of indentation, this cavity that's going on. It's like a sinkhole. So you can think of it in a way, it's opposite of relaxed because it's gathering those vertices up into a spot and distorting the geometry and jumping back to relax. Relax is kind of redistributing the vertices in an even way. So think about relax and pinch and the actions they create. Flatten, that's a cool one, especially for our moon scene here, because it'll just make this harder edge on top. I'm going to decrease the size of my brush. I kind of want to flatten out this surface. Average it out so it's not so rounded. Maybe after wear and tear on the moon, it will become rounded. I want some more jaggies like this. So that's a nice place to build my lunar home right there, or to land maybe a lunar module. Now, it's going to be tricky to land it there, but I think we could do it. It's a flat surface. If I fail, well, I'll just cobble over here and then land over there. So that's flattening when you want a harder edge on your model. Foam. I think foam would be better if I was doing a character, but there's foam. It doesn't do much for me on this scale. Let me undo. I don't think that would happen. Now, if my brush was bigger, though, and my magnitude less, I need to zoom out to maybe see my magnitude becoming less. There we go. No, foam worked. Now, I don't know what this hill is. Maybe this is the hill of all the lunar garbage will be piled in there, and nuclear waste and things like that. I don't know. I'm going to hit undo for that one. Oh, as a tip, if you press the Control spacebar, you'll zoom into a full view. I know, should have mentioned this to start with, because who doesn't want a full view when you're sculpting? And again, Control spacebar again. We'll toggle to the whole interface. Control spacebar. Full view. That's excellent, right? The knife tool, much like you think, it's going to carve out our surface. Let me get B key. And my magnitude's pretty high right now. So let me drop that down. The quickest way to drop it down, of course, is just click on the properties box, decrease your strip. In case you don't feel like dragging and waiting, there's my strip. So here's the knife tool. I'll just carve into the surface like this. You can think of it much like the sculpt tool. If I use the sculpt tool and press the Control key. All right, very similar. The wax tool will build up the surface. So there's something that, well, looks like it crashed into the planet. Maybe that's where I'll build a rocket ship that crashed into the surface. Let me hit undo for that. The smear tool, whoa, kind of smudges things. Let's look at the magnitude on the smear tool before I use it. Strength was way too high. Let's start out very soft movements with our sculpting. It's dragging around the vertices. For this type of model on the surface, it's not going to be that useful. But for a character, it might be a lot more useful. Like when you have lots and lots of vertices and you need to start blending all those vertices around. The freeze tool is used to freeze some of the surface, like a mask. And you'll draw a mask because maybe there's some features. Like, let's say I really like this feature and this hill and here. I don't want to accidentally sculpt on them. By freezing this, you'll protect this feature. With the sculpt tool selected, when I sculpt, it's not going to interfere with this. Now, it interfered here a little bit because I didn't have 100% of the mask on. See that little gray here? So I should have covered it a little better. The main feature, though, can't be sculpted on, but this can. To unfreeze the surface, press the Shift-U key. If I had the freeze tool again on, like this, and I press the Control key, that will remove that section. So remember, the Control key does the opposite when sculpting. Well, I hope you have some fun building your own lunar surface, then add a nice texture to it. Make sure you have a good UV coordinate system on it. Then add some nice textures to it. Put a nice HDRI image in the background. Maybe something spacey looking. Put a few spaceships down there, and you're all set to take us to the moon and beyond. To smooth out this object, go to the Object level and go into Mesh, Retopolize, open up the Properties box. Pre-process mesh is checked. I don't need to keep the original one. Preserve hard edges, like up here. I'll use 4,000 as the face count. What is my current face count? My current face count is 10,000, almost 11,000. I want to keep that. So let me just go to 10,000 and hit apply and wait for it. And so this fixed some of the jaggies that were going on here. It's something optional you could do depending upon how your landscape looks, because if it looks fine, especially after you put the texture maps on it, add that HDRI image into it and render, it might look excellent. If it's not looking quite as good, maybe you want to look into retopolizing the surface. I look forward to you sharing your own off-world surfaces using the sculpting technique.